You hear the name Wyatt Earp, and what do you think of? Fearless lawman, right? The hero of the Old West, staring down outlaws at the OK Corral. He's become this symbol of frontier justice, the man who brought law to the lawless. But that is the legend. And the truth? Well, it's a whole lot messier.
And this quote, it just perfectly sums up the image we all have in our heads, right? It's from that famous 1931 biography that basically made him a superstar after he died. It paints a picture of a tough, self-reliant hero, a man whose actions did all the talking. This is the Wyatt Earp of the movies, the perfect symbol of justice in a wild, ruthless time. Because what if that whole legend is the greatest trick he ever pulled off? You see, behind that heroic image, there's a very different man, a man full of contradictions, of shadows, with a past so dark it was almost completely erased from history. So today, we're gonna pull back the curtain and unmask the real man behind that famous badge.
Okay, so to really get who this guy was, we've got to go way back. Way before the famous gunfights, way before he ever pinned on a marshal's badge. We're going to a time in his life that wasn't defined by heroism at all, but by a terrible personal tragedy and a sharp, well-documented turn into a life of crime.
So in early 1870, Wyatt's life looked pretty good. He was a newly married constable in Missouri, and it seemed like a quiet, respectable future was all laid out for him. But then, within a year, his young wife, Urilla, died suddenly from typhoid. And that loss, it seems like it just broke something inside him. It unleashed a totally different side of Wyatt Earp. He started to drift, and his whole moral compass just shattered. And look, let's be super clear here. This isn't just gossip or rumors we're talking about. This stuff is all in court documents and newspaper clippings from the time. He was accused of flat-out stealing school funds. He was arrested for horse theft and then broke out of jail to avoid his trial. And then in Peoria, Illinois, he was arrested over and over again for his work in brothels, so much so that the local papers and the authorities straight up called him a pimp. Yeah, that was Wyatt Earp before the legend.
You'd think pinning on a badge would change things, right? No, this pattern kept going, even after he became a lawman. You see, in the wild cattle towns of Kansas, that line between lawman and lawbreaker was incredibly blurry. And for Wyatt, they were often just two sides of the same very profitable coin.
So his official salary as a cop was maybe $60 a month. Not a lot, even back then. But that was just his day job. He and other officers were actually known around town as the Fighting Pimps. Why? Because they moonlighted as enforcers in brothels and ran gambling tables in the saloons. Think about that. He's policing the very same vice economy that's lining his own pockets. The lines are, well, they're not just blurry, they're basically gone.
So, how did he actually enforce the law? You know that classic Hollywood quick draw scene? Yeah, forget about it. Earp's signature move wasn't about being fast, it was about brute force. He was famous for buffaloing troublemakers. It's a fancy word for pistol whipping, basically. Cracking someone over the head with the long, heavy barrel of his revolver. It worked, for sure, but it definitely shows a much more violent, hands-on approach to keeping the peace than the romantic image we usually get.
All right, now let's get to it. Tombstone, Arizona, the place where 30 seconds of gunfire would make him a legend. But here's the thing you probably don't know. The gunfight at the OK Corral, it wasn't some noble stand for law and order, not even close. It was the messy, violent end to a secret deal, a conspiracy that just blew up in everyone's faces. And it all kicked off because of this number, $6,000. That was the reward money out for a group of stagecoach robbers. Now Wyatt desperately wanted to get elected county sheriff, and he saw this as his golden ticket. So he comes up with this scheme, this secret deal with a known outlaw, Ike Clanton. The plan was pretty simple, really. Ike helps Wyatt capture the robbers, Wyatt gets all the reward money and the political glory, and Ike gets a nice little cut. But of course, the whole thing went south. Ike Clanton got spooked, thinking Wyatt was going to double-cross him and expose him as an informant. So he starts drinking a lot, and he starts running his mouth all over town, publicly threatening to kill the Earp brothers. And that's the key right there. The most famous gunfight in history didn't just happen. It was a direct result of Wyatt's own shady, backroom deal-making completely blowing up in his face. So on October 26, 1881, that tension finally explodes. The Earps and Doc Holliday face off against the cowboys in a small lot, and in just 30 seconds, can you believe that? 30 seconds, about 30 shots get fired. It was just pure, brutal chaos, a storm of lead and black powder smoke. When all that smoke cleared, the scene was just carnage. 3 of the cowboys were dead. On the other side, both of Wyatt's brothers, Virgil and Morgan, were wounded. So was Doc Holliday. And then there's Wyatt Earp, the only guy in his crew to walk away without so much as a scratch on him.
Now, a judge did clear the Earps of murder, but their enemies, they weren't done, not by a long shot. In the months after the gunfight, the cowboys came looking for revenge. And in doing that, they unleashed something way more dangerous than a lawman. They unleashed a stone-cold killer.
First, they ambushed his older brother Virgil, hitting him with a shotgun blast that crippled his arm for life. Then, just a few months later, they shot his younger brother Morgan in the back and killed him while he was just playing a game of pool. And that was it. That was the breaking point. For Wyatt Earp, whatever faith he had left in the legal system, it died right there with his brother. Now, it was all about vengeance.
So, using a deputy U.S. Marshal's badge as legal cover, Wyatt put together a posse and started hunting. And let's be real, this wasn't about making arrests. This was about executions, pure and simple. He trapped one of the suspects, Frank Stillwell, in a train yard and killed him. He tracked another man, Florentino Cruz, to a camp and shot him down. Then he went after the leader, Curly Bill Brocious, and killed him in a shootout.
I mean, listen to how the local paper described Frank Stillwell's body. It wasn't just shot, it was riddled with bullets. Wyatt himself supposedly said later he shot the man so many times you could have sold him for scrap metal. This wasn't justice, this was a vendetta.
And here's where the story takes its most ironic twist. For what he did on that vendetta ride, a coroner's jury officially named Wyatt Earp as the man responsible for Stillwell's death. Murder warrants were issued for him and his whole posse. Think about that. Wyatt Earp, the legendary lawman, was now a wanted man himself, a fugitive on the run from the very law he supposedly represented.
So after all the gun smoke clears, Wyatt Earp enters a new phase of his life. You see, he'd lived by the gun, but his last, and maybe his greatest, battle wasn't fought with a pistol. It was fought with a story. He became obsessed with rewriting his own history. Well, after he left the frontier, his reputation actually took a huge nosedive. In 1896, he refereed this big heavyweight boxing match, and his controversial call to disqualify one of the fighters led to a huge scandal. Everyone screamed that the fight was fixed. The press just destroyed him. In the public's mind, he went from hero back to being a con man. This public humiliation just absolutely aided him, and it's what really lit a fire under him to take control of his own story, to rewrite his history before it was too late.
So he moves to Los Angeles, right next door to the brand new movie industry, and he really starts working on his legacy. He started hanging out on movie sets, becoming buddies with the big silent Western stars of the day, hoping one of them could get his life story turned into a movie. But the thing is, the studios, they weren't buying it. He never got that movie made. In his own lifetime, he never really became the hero he so desperately wanted to be. The legend would have to be built after he was already gone.
So how did the legend get made? Well, it happened right here. 2 years after Wyatt died, a writer named Stuart Lake published this biography, and it was a massive bestseller. The problem? The book was basically historical fiction. It smoothed over all the rough edges, it glossed over the pimping, the horse thefts, the murder warrants. It invented these heroic one-liners and turned this incredibly complex, morally gray guy into the shining white hat hero of the Old West that we all think we know today.
So in the end, who was Wyatt Earp? The truth is, he was never just one thing, was he? He was a cop and a criminal. A brother out for revenge who became a cold-blooded killer. A vigilante who, through some clever storytelling, became a folk hero. The real story of his life is just this messy, fascinating, and endless contradiction.
And that really leaves us with one last question, not just about him, but about us. When we look back at history and we look for heroes, what are we really searching for? Are we looking for the messy, complicated truth about who people were? Or are we just looking for the legend we need them to be, even if it's built on a foundation of lies? The answer, I think, says a lot more about us than it does about him.